Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So as you guys can see by the title of this video, this is going to be my mid-year reading wrap up. So I did this last year and I had so much fun kind of seeing what I had read throughout the year and how close I was to my goal and things like that. So I thought I would do another one for this year. So obviously I have some books here. I also have a massive stack on the ground here. Some of these books were also library books, so I don't have physical copies of. Some books I have donated because I didn't like them, and other books that I have read this year I have got on loan to people as of right now. So there is quite a mix of different books in this video. I also apologize if you can hear the cat in the background. So I thought how I would do this video is I will be reading from my reading journal. So I thought we'll start with stats and then I'll go through kind of like month by month in the order of the books that I have read, and I'll give you guys a little bit of a synopsis of them and then let you guys know my thoughts of them. So all of the books that I will be sharing in this video are from January to June. So as I'm filming this, it is July, so any books that I read in July will be in my end of year reading wrap up, which I will probably put up in January next year. Without further ado, let's jump into this video. We'll start off with some stats, which I'll be reading from my reading journal. I did do a video all on my reading journal, so if you guys missed that, then I'll leave that video down below. So far this year I have read 33 books, so my goal was 55, so far I am well on track. I have read 7 romance, 10 fantasies, 7 Christian non-fiction, 1 non-fiction, 3 science fiction / dystopian, 3 mystery and general fiction, and 2 thrillers. So my book taste kind of goes all over the place. I have read 11,525 pages. I have read 9 books out of my 24 books in 2024, and January and March were the months that I read the most books, so I read 7 books in each of those months, and my least amount of reading months were April and June, where I read 4 books in both of those months. So that is all for stats. Let's get into the books that I read in January. So the first book that I finished in January was a book that I actually started in December last year but just didn't quite finish it. The Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J Maas. So this is the 3rd book in the ACOTAR series. So ACOTAR is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. This book here is told from Feyre's point of view, and Feyre basically is like a hunter for her family. Her family are like quite poor, and she goes out hunting one day and she shoots a wolf, and the wolf turns out to be not a wolf. So she ends up getting taken into the fairy realms, or like the fairy realms. I always call it fairy because I can't associate fairy with what these creatures are described as. And she basically just has to live out her days in this fairy realm, and a whole bunch of stuff happens, and this book here focuses on the war. I really enjoyed this book. Obviously it's the 3rd book in the ACOTAR series. The war was quite brutal. I didn't think it was too long, even though it is 736 pages. Things were described beautifully, very politics heavy. You got more information on the other courts, which I really enjoyed. So the book is split into like different courts, and I said that it kept my interest the whole time. Really enjoyed this. It was a great start to the year. The next book that I read I don't have a physical copy of because I read it as a library book. My sister does have a physical copy of this book, and she only reads books once and then kind of gets rid of them, or she gives them to me if I want them. So I'm just waiting for her to read this so I can get her a copy. If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. This one is a YA romance book. It is also a sad book, a tearjerker, but you are following Autumn and Finn. They were childhood best friends and something happened and now they no longer speak. You get told the event that happens at the beginning of the book, but you don't know anything before the event and you don't know anything after the event, and and so the story kind of goes back and forth between like then and now. I also think it's just a single POV, but we have the second book has been released where I believe it is the guy's point of view for this story. Definitely check the trigger warnings and things for this one as well. This one was really good. It was sad and I cried. I said that it is YA and it definitely reads young and just focuses on like growing up, drifting a friendship, talks about childhood friends, and then I just says that it has short chapters, and I binged it over 2 nights, and I do really want a physical copy of this book. The next book that I read is a Christian non-fiction. This one is Crazy Love by Francis Chan. This one here is the first like Christian non-fiction that I have like really connected deeply with, and this one talks about the love that we should have for God and God's love for us. There was just a lot of wisdom in this book. Really enjoyed. It was the best Christian non-fiction book I've read, and that's a big claim because I've read quite a lot of Christian non-fiction books. I said it took an easy topic and really fleshed it out and applied it to day-to-day life, and it had lots of information for a short book. So this one was only 186 pages, so very dense and has a lot of wisdom in it. Would definitely recommend if you are wanting some new Christian non-fiction books to read. Then I read another library book. So I read Waste of a Life by Simon Brett. This one here is an adult mystery book. I don't want a physical copy of this book. These here are my thoughts. I said that it was a very meh book, like it was alright, that it was a decluttering mystery. The thing that was a bit that I didn't really like about this book is that it used big words in everyday conversation, which I felt like wasn't really how people spoke. It kind of felt like it was adding big words for the sake of adding big words. I said that it had a subplot which I felt like was irrelevant to the story overall, and now I don't even remember what that subplot, actually no, I do remember what the subplot was. I felt like the author was just trying to add something in for the sake of interest, but it didn't really need to be there and it didn't really work. And then I just said that it was an adult book and it was short at only 186 pages. So that's kind of why I finished it, because it was very short. This is like part of a series as well, I think, that this author does with a bunch of like adult mysteries, but I just don't really have any interest in reading any others because I didn't really like this book. Then after that book I really wanted to read something good, so I went into A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J Maas. So this one is the little novella Akafas in the ACOTAR series. This one just talks about Feyre and the winter solstice that everyone is preparing for. So just a very short, kind of like almost holiday-esque kind of book. So this one obviously is fantasy. ACOTAR started off as a YA fantasy series, but it has now moved into adult. It was okay. It was my least favorite out of the series so far. I said that it was more character focused than plot heavy. First person where you're following Feyre and Rhys, but third person when you're following everyone else. So that was a bit odd how Sarah J Maas chose to do some of it first person and some of it third person. Like, I think she did the character's name at the top of the chapter. Yes, she did. But I feel like because she had done that, you could have written it as first person the whole way through and it still would have read the same. I said that I enjoyed the different perspectives and I enjoyed all of the painting scenes with Feyre. Shatter Me by Tahara Murphy. So this is a dystopian YA series. So this one here was a book on my 24 books to read in 2024. It was also my sister Shelby and I's book club pick for January. So we started a book club this year and we both read Shatter Me. So this one here I started in Wellington when my sister was having a procedure done, so I was in the waiting room just like binging this book. You are following Juliet, and Juliet has basically like fatal touch where if she touches somebody they will die. When we meet Juliet, she is currently locked up in the re-establishment, kind of goes back and forth with like her childhood and her being in this facility, and then someone breaks her out of this facility and I think they want to like weaponize her with her lethal touch. So very interesting concept. It's an 8-book series as well. That I enjoyed it. It was good when I was binging it, but the middle was a bit slow and I felt like if I was picking up and putting it down, I didn't enjoy it as much as when I was sitting and binging it. I said that I wished we'd got to see more of her gift, which I feel like maybe we will get later on in the series, because I think there was only one incident where she had touched somebody and they died, where I feel like if you've got a character who has lethal touch, it would have been better to show more people, I think, with like interacting with her. Some words were repeated and they felt unnecessary. That the romance was very, very quick, so I don't feel like it was as developed and fleshed out as it could have been. So I think this was probably, it was definitely different to my expectations, and I think my expectations were higher just with it being a popular book talk book. But in saying that, I have continued the series, and I feel like with this book here, it's definitely one that you need to continue the series to try and see how it unfolds rather than just looking at it on its own. And then the last book that I read in January is Beach Read by Emily Henry. So this one is a romance book. I think it's adult romance, where you are following January and August, or Gus, and they are both authors. She goes to this small town and Gus is there, and Gus and her, I think they were friends in college or high school or something, or they were associates. They knew each other, and Gus is also an established author. So January writes romance, Gus writes literary fiction, and they decide to swap genres for the summer, and they go on like adventures and stuff with each other to like help each other kind of like research for their book. Yeah, this was a good story. So this one, I said that I enjoyed it, and it was good when I was binging it. The romance was developed very well. It was a great summer read. Good banter, which I think Emily Henry is known for her banter. I really enjoyed all of the side characters. It was a short and sweet book at 267 pages, and I was reading this on the beach, and it was just such a vibe. Alright, now we go into February reads. February was a month where I read quite a few library books. So the first book I read was Love, Life and the List by Casey West. I got this recommendation off of Rachel Catherine. YA romance where you have this girl who is in high school who basically wants her pictures to be featured in this gallery, but her teacher tells her, I think that she's like not old enough to compete, or that her paintings aren't developed well enough to compete, and so she comes up with a plan to complete this list, where she is basically doing this list to help get her artistic creative juices flowing, basically. This book here, I said that I don't need a copy, and these were my thoughts. So I said that I enjoyed it. I liked all the art talk, that the characters were likable, and I loved the side characters. I said that it had subtle talk about mental health, so definitely look up the trigger warnings for this book. I said that it was a slow burn, friends to lovers, read quickly, but just reads very young, and good pacing. So that's the main reason I don't want to get a copy, because it just reads like very, very young. And like some of the books that I read young, but this one read very, very young. Wildfire by Hannah Grace. So this one is the second book in the Maple Hills series. Icebreaker is the first one, this is the second one. We have Daydream, which is the third book, coming out later on this year. So this book here, you are following Russ and Aurora. Russ, we meet a little bit in Icebreaker, but he's not in there for a long time. He is the goalie in this ice hockey team. Aurora is a new character. Basically, they have a one-night stand at a party, and then they end up both being camp counselors at this summer camp. I thoroughly enjoyed this. This is an adult romance book, and these are my thoughts. I said that I loved this book. This was actually my favorite book that I read in February. I loved the main characters and the side characters. Great banter and humor, made me giggle and kick my feet. Just said that it had a bit of spice, so be aware going into the Maple Hills series that it is spicy. There definitely was more spice towards the end of the book rather than the beginning of the book, whereas I feel like Icebreaker was the other way around, where there was a lot of spice at the beginning and not a lot at the end. I said that it had good character development, the chapters were a good length. I loved the summer camp setting, and I really liked that the epilogue matched up in the same timeline to the Icebreaker epilogue. But obviously if you do read this book first and you read the epilogue, it will spoil Icebreaker for you. So I would recommend starting with Icebreaker and then going into them. Obviously they are like standalones in the series, but that's just the way that I would do it. Christian fiction book this time, and that is The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. I have been wanting to read this book for quite a while. Basically you are following an older demon as he teaches a younger demon how to be a demon, basically. It definitely gives a lot of insight, not into how demons work, because I know this is fictionalized, but kind of helps your brain understand it in a way that you can see how temptation kind of works in life. So this one here, I said that it was good and very thought-provoking. It was definitely for a mature Christian, as big words and concepts could be challenging to understand. Very dense, even though it was a short book and it was an interesting concept. This was also another book that was on my 24 books to read in 2024, so I'm really happy that I read this one. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So this book here I originally borrowed from the library, absolutely loved it, and really wanted my own copy of this one. So this one, you are following Violet, and Violet is attending this war college where she really wants to be a scribe, who are like the people who write down history. Her mum is like a mayor, or like the top person in this war college, and her mum is basically like, no daughter of mine will be a scribe, she will be a dragon rider, who are kind of like the military. They have to learn how to like protect their village from threats, and so they go through all these trials when they're training, and Violet basically just has to survive, and she is this very like meek, mellow, passive person. It also has dragons in this book, so very fun. It's kind of a mix between like How to Train Your Dragon, Hunger Games, and Harry Potter, and I absolutely loved this, obviously, because I got my own copy. Let me read you my thoughts. So this one is an adult, I think it's adult fantasy, this one. Fast paced, I read quickly. It didn't feel like 500 pages. The only thing that I didn't like was the childhood best friend, as he always put her down. The love interest was a bit flawed but grows on you. The side characters were a bit meh, and I felt the ending could have been longer, but it was definitely jaw-dropping. So very good. I do want to read the second book, which is called Iron Flame as well, but I haven't read that yet. But yeah, I did really enjoy this. It was also very easy fantasy world to understand. Like, you don't need to be an experienced fantasy reader to understand Fourth Wing. I read another library book which I am content without a copy of, and that is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. This was my first Alice Oseman book, and basically you are following, I think you're following a couple characters, where this one guy has a kind of like online web show or like radio show called Radio Silence, where he just talks about a bunch of stuff, and this other chick is like really obsessed with this radio show. It's kind of like quite a popular radio show in this book, and I think she is just trying to figure out who Radio Silence is, basically. This was my least favorite book that I had read this year so far. Yeah, that it followed kids in high school learning to accept themselves, but it kind of made it that uni was like the be-all and end-all, where it really isn't the be-all and end-all. I said that it wasn't much plot, short chapters, so I read it fast, but it was too long. It was 405 pages, which I felt like it could have been 300. It addresses abuse and LGBTQ+, which I don't really vibe with LGBTQ+ books as a Christian. I read one last year, which was They Both Die at the End. It's just not something that I like to read about, which if you like to read about it, that's fine. I said that it didn't need the swearing in it, as it was a teen fiction book, and that it was kind of boring, and I was disappointed by it, so hence why I don't need a copy. And then the last book that I read in February is another Christian non-fiction book, and that is this one here. So this one is Compared to Her by Sophie DeWitt, and this one just addressed comparison, and as females how we tend to compare ourselves a lot to other females and other people, and the book just says how to experience true contentment. This was a book that we got recommended at a Women's Refresh conference, which is kind of like an event that my church run, where they get like guest speakers to come in who are women, and it's just like all of the women from the congregation can go. Very good. Addresses so many things to do with comparison and why we experience it. Said that it was definitely a convicting book, and definitely one that I want to reread. I said that you could read it in one sitting if you wanted to, but if you're wanting to binge it, to read it over a week, that way you get kind of the most out of it that you can, and I think that's what I did. I think I read it over a week. It said that it addresses learning to find contentment in God, and it was short and sweet, as it was only 105 pages, so definitely a great book. Okay, so those are all for the books on the ground. So now we move into this stack here. So now we're into March. First book I read in March was actually mine and my sister's book club pick for February, and I started it in February and I didn't finish it until like the beginning of March. But that is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Quite a well-known book talk book, basically, where you have the Grisha people and the kind of like normal people. The Grisha people have powers, the other people do not, and you have two lands and you have a fold separating the two lands, and the fold is just like pure darkness, and there's like monsters and things that live in this fold. You kind of have to cross from one land to the other to get supplies back and forth, because one of these lands is near the coast and the other one isn't, so they kind of get like all the shipment stuff that they have to go between. So you have to like cross the fold to be able to do that, and you are following, is it Elena, who basically gets put on a mission to cross the fold, and the story kind of goes from there. So this is a YA fantasy series and I really enjoyed this. Let me give you guys my thoughts. I said that it was fast paced. I really enjoyed it, and it was very easy to read. I felt the fold and the stag scenes were a bit short though, but considering they were like the main kind of parts of the story, they could have been a little bit longer. And then I just said that I finished it 2 days into March, being our February book club pick. So I do feel like it could have been maybe like 20 pages longer, because it was around 350 pages, which is good, but I feel like some of the scenes that were like main scenes could have been expanded on a little bit more. But still a great book. I'm yet to continue the series, but I have got all of the series and I really want to continue the series. The next book that I read in March, I do still have my physical copy of, but I have currently lent it to my best friend Rachel. 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. So this was my first Holly Jackson book. This is a YA thriller and I absolutely loved this book, and I thought I would love it, and I'm so happy that I did. It gave me similar vibes to Black Ice by Becca Fitzpatrick, because that involves a vehicle breaking down, and so does this book here. So you're following 6 like young people. I think they're college kids, and they're like on their, I think it's their spring break and or their winter break, and they're kind of like traveling in this RV to this place to just basically like go to the beach, hang out. On the way there, they're like traveling at night to try and beat the traffic, and their RV breaks down because someone shoots the RV and like busts the tire, and basically they are kind of now trapped in this RV, and there is someone outside who is shooting at this RV. Each of the people on this RV have secrets, and so it's kind of just like a book that you're kind of just trying to figure out whose secret they want and what everybody's secrets are. It is also told over a 24-hour period, so it's told by like the hours, which honestly just builds so much suspense, and I thought it was written very well. I think this was my top book from March. Yeah, I read it in 2 days and binged it. The pacing was good. It was definitely like adrenaline jumpy. Good plot twists. I said that I didn't guess the overall twist. I guessed part of the plot, but not the full plot. It was told in third person, which I didn't think I would like, but I actually did. I said that the main character struggled mentally a little bit, but I understood her and thought that the side characters were interesting, so definitely check the trigger warnings. I said that it had good humour, and this was also a book that was on my 24 books to read in 2024. The next book that I read in March was another one again on my 24 books to read in 2024, but I don't have the physical copy anymore, which might tell you something, because I have a lot of books and I'm just trying to keep books on my shelf that I absolutely love and would recommend to other people, and that is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I said that this was my least favourite book that I had read in March so far, and probably one of my least favourites that I had read out of the entire year. I said that I had really high expectations because it is a well-loved book and it's won like awards and things, but it was very different to what I thought it was. It was told over a period of 30 years, which I just feel like is so long. So it started off with these like following these kids as like young kids, and by the time that we finished the book they were like grown up, so we kind of grew up with them, but it just felt kind of a bit unnecessary. Third person and too many characters to follow, and it was too long at almost 500 pages, and that the only part that I enjoyed was the ending, and that it was very, very slow. That was a bit of a shame. And I remember the only parts that I actually liked was when it told things about the actual circus, but it didn't actually tell much about the circus at all, which you would think that it would, considering the book is called The Night Circus. But I feel like it focused more on the people rather than like the actual circus itself. So it was definitely my most disappointing read. Christian non-fiction, which again I don't have the physical copy of anymore because I just didn't love it and I didn't think I would recommend it to everybody. But that is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I didn't love it. I said that it was a bit too jokey for a Christian book. I said that I preferred Crazy Busy as I felt I got more out of that one. So this one kind of addressed busyness and like hustle culture and hurry, but I don't feel like it was done as well as Crazy Busy, and it kind of felt like it was joking the whole time, which I didn't really love. I felt like it was a topic that needed to be talked about seriously because it is quite a prominent issue in today's society, and I feel like it was just, yeah, it just completely lost it for me. So after those two disappointing books, I really wanted to read something that I thought I would enjoy. So I picked up 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston, or Poston, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce her surname. This one here was mine and my sister's book club pick for March, and this I loved. So this one here is a fantasy book. I think it's YA, but I could be wrong. This one here, I said that I really, really loved this. I enjoyed the plot. Clementine inherits an apartment from her grandmother when her grandmother passes away, and her grandmother always joked that the apartment was magical, and Clementine obviously thought nothing of it. But then one day she comes home and her apartment is set 7 years in the past, so all of the furniture and stuff has changed, but outside it is still present day. And when she comes home one day, there is a man in her apartment, so it kind of just like follows that kind of story. So I thought the plot was very, very interesting, and I hadn't read anything like it before. Some of the conversations were a little bit sporadic, but I loved the main character and the love interest. I said that I wasn't a fan of the gay relationship in the book, because again, I don't really like to read about that stuff being a Christian, but because it was one of the side characters, it wasn't as prevalent, so that was kind of just like a side thing that I noticed. Loved the humor, but I also liked the way that grief was addressed, because I thought it was done very, very well. The next book that I read, I again don't have the copy of anymore, not because it was a bad book, but just because I felt like I didn't need it on my shelf. The Wedding by Nicholas Sparks. So this one is the sequel to The Notebook, which I read last year, and again I didn't keep The Notebook, so I felt like I didn't need to keep The Wedding. Follows Noah and, is it Noah and Ellie? One of their kids' partners, I think. And talks about like their relationship and things like that. So again, it was kind of more of like a character study than like a plot driven book. It was okay. It was following the son-in-law. It was a little bit cheesy and the plot wasn't that deep. It was quite fluffy, and the chapter length was very varied. Like it just was, some chapters were really short, some were really long. I apologize if things look a little bit different or if I'm in a different spot. I just took a break to have some food and to also charge my battery because it was dead. So we're back now. So the last book that I read in the month of March is Destroy Me by Tahara Mafi. So this one is like a little novella that comes after Shatter Me. And this one here I don't have a physical copy of because they don't sell it in the bookstores here in New Zealand. I actually read this on my sister's iPad when I was in Hawke's Bay when she was there. So I do want to get a physical copy of this. I just don't have one yet. But it was good. It was a short novella from the villain's story, which was actually really interesting. I thought it added to the story. It had a good plot as well. And it kind of told us a little bit more about the guy who was kind of portrayed as the antagonist. So I really, really enjoyed it. Alright, now we get into the books in April. So the first book that I read in April, Desolations of Devil's Acre by Ransom Riggs. This is the last book in the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children series. This is a YA, like urban fantasy series. Basically you follow Jacob, and Jacob, yeah, kind of lives like a normal life and then one day his grandfather dies and leaves him a cryptic message to find the lady in the loop, and then he ends up on an adventure to find the lady in the loop, which turns out to be Miss Peregrine and her peculiar children. And all of these peculiar children have like abilities and powers that they probably shouldn't have as kids, but they do. And yeah, Jacob learns a lot about himself. I really like that the story is crafted around photographs like this, like just really old vintage photographs. Some of them are like really odd, but they're all 100% authentic old Polaroids, and Ransom Riggs has kind of given these Polaroids a story, which is really cool because I really like that no matter who you are reading this series, we all kind of have a very similar picture as to what is going on. So this one here was actually my favorite book from April. Absolutely loved. It was the final book in the series, so it felt bittersweet. I said that it was good and action-packed and had a good ending. It incorporated ideas from all of the books, so it kind of wrapped them all up really well. And I said that I love all the characters and that they genuinely feel like my friends, so it was very bittersweet to end the series, but I cannot wait to one day reread this series because it's honestly one of my favorite series of all time. Another book that I no longer own the physical copy of because I just did not like it, 24 Hours by Greg Iles. So this one here is an adult thriller, and almost DNF'd this book a couple times because it was that bad. I literally said it was a waste of time, so incredibly slow that the convos and the inner monologues were too long, not enough action. One chapter I even skipped over, some scenes I didn't want to read about, and I found the concept a little bit unbelievable. What happens is you are following this group of people who steal a child and then demand ransom money to pay back these people that they owe money to, and then they give the child back at the end of this 24 hours. They don't do anything to the children, they just take them to get the money and then go forth. But it was just really unbelievable because the like main villain would tell his victims exactly who he was, like his name, all of that stuff, would give out a lot of personal info, and he'd been doing this for like 5 years or so and hadn't got caught. And I just found that so unbelievable. Considering it was told over a period of 24 hours, I kind of expected a similar kind of vibe to 5 Survive, where it was very fast paced, but it was so incredibly slow and honestly was such a waste of time. So I'm so happy that I got it off of my bookshelf. After that, I wanted to read something that I presumed I would like, so I read Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. You are following Bree, who kind of goes to the small town to kind of escape some things that are going on, and in this town she meets a man called Archer, and Archer doesn't speak at all, and they have a bit of a run-in, and she thinks he's a bit like odd, but she's very curious about him, and she asks some people around in the small town about him, and they're like, oh yeah, that's Archer, like he just doesn't speak at all, like he hasn't spoken to anybody in years. And so Bree is very intrigued and kind of just wants to get to know Archer. And there are so many levels to Archer. I did really enjoy this book. This is a romance book. I think it's adult, but I could be wrong. It was a little bit cringy at times, and I felt Archer's growth could have been expanded on a bit more throughout the book. But I really enjoyed the small town and the side characters. I said that it's wise to check the trigger warnings in this book because it did definitely touch on some heavier topics, and I also really liked the sign language representation in this book. Somebody who has a deaf sister, like, I don't know a lot of sign language, I know a little bit, but I really liked the representation that they had in this book with sign language because I think it is such an important language. Again, a nice kind of like summer read. I didn't read it in summer, but would be a great one to read in the summer. And also Archer's Voice was our book club pick for April. A Christian non-fiction book, Enjoying God by Tim Chester. It says experience the power and love of God in everyday life. So again, just learning how to enjoy God. So this one here, I said that I enjoyed. I said it all revolved how we can enjoy God in different areas of life and how God works in different ways. And then I just said there was a lot of wisdom in this book. I definitely got a lot out of it. This was also a newer one that I had purchased this year, so I'm really happy that I've read it. It was also very, very short at only like 185 pages. So moving on to the books in May, The Mortal Instruments, City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. So this one is a YA urban fantasy series where you follow Clary, and she is kind of just like going about living her normal life, and then one day she is in a club and she sees a guy kill another guy, but her other friend can't see it, only she can see it. And then she comes home and her mum has disappeared, and so it's kind of like these two things are kind of like connected. And then you follow people who are demon hunters. It also has vampires and werewolves in this series as well. This one here was really, really popular when I was like 14, but kind of like around the same time as like Divergent and Hunger Games and all of that kind of stuff. But I never ever read this, so I'm really happy that I have started this series now. I really enjoy Cassandra Clare's writing. It's very, very easy to understand. And this one here was also on my 24 books to read in 2024. Really, really enjoyed this book. It had good pacing. I really enjoyed the side characters and a very interesting concept because I haven't read anything like this before. The next book is a book that I don't currently have because I have lent it out to my best friend Rachel, but that is The Block by Ben Oliver. So this is the second book in the Loop trilogy. So I read the first book last year for the first time and absolutely loved it. If you've been on my channel for a while, you have probably heard me rave about this book. Follow Luca, and Luca is a prisoner on death row. He is in a prison called the Loop, and the prison is controlled by AI. You can do these things called delays where you have new technology tested on you and it pushes the date of your death back. And these delays are designed to try and enhance life in the outside world. So Luca kind of does the same thing every single day, the exact same routine. He's in this cell for 23 hours a day. 1 hour a day he can go out and get some like sunshine and things, but he can't see any of the other prisoners because there are all these walls in between each of the cells that are like concrete, so they all have their own like patch of grass and things like that. He can talk to them, but he just can't see them. And then one day the entire system glitches and it's kind of like a race to escape. There's also rumors of like rebellion and things in the outside world as well. So it's very, very fast paced, YA, very easy to read. The first book does read quite young, but it is a really, really good series. It's kind of a cross between The Maze Runner and The Matrix. So if you really liked The Maze Runner growing up, you will really, really like the series. It's a new series as well. It was published in 2020. It was not as good as the first one, but that the plot was still enjoyable and it had an interesting storyline. I loved the characters, both the side characters and the main character. I said the pacing was a little weird in parts, as some parts felt too quick and others felt good. Just with some of like the main events that they'd kind of been building up to. Some of them were like quite short and others of them were quite long, so it was like a little bit inconsistent. Chapter length was a little bit all over the place, but some chapters were as short as 1 page and some were as long as 50 pages, so that was a bit weird. Because in the first book it was all very, very short chapters. The ending kind of confused me, as I'm not sure how they're going to go about the third book just with how it ended. Obviously I don't want to spoil anything. I definitely think the first book was a lot better than the second book, but in saying that, there still was a lot in the second book that I did really enjoy. Adult, kind of like general fiction with a bit of a subplot of romance book. Legally Blonde by Amanda Brown. This book here obviously follows Elle Woods, and Elle Woods has kind of been going out with this guy in college. She's in the sorority and she thinks she's about to get engaged, but she actually ends up getting dumped because her boyfriend is about to go off to law school, and basically he tells Elle that like he wants to find someone more serious at law school, and so it becomes Elle's mission to go to law school to prove to this guy that she is serious. I really enjoyed it. It had good pacing. I said same plot as the movie but some differences, but I actually really enjoyed the book still. I said I understood the legal jargon, which I think added to the reading experience, because if you don't know, I am studying law at uni, so a lot of the stuff that was in this that if you weren't studying law would probably go over your head, but I got it and I could really like sympathize with Elle in the environment that she's in, like going through law school, because I'm the exact same right now. That it was a short and sweet read at only 270 pages. I said that it was told in third person, but I felt like I understood the main character. So again, really enjoyed. One that Phil and I had been reading together literally since like November last year, and we had kind of got into a routine and then didn't get into a routine, and we'd kind of been like reading this on and off, but it was so nice to have finally finished this book, Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland. So this one just talks about the heart of Christ and Christ's character a lot, and kind of does like a deep dive into it. Also, just as a side note, I absolutely love this cover. I think it's stunning. This took us so long to get through, which is surprising because it's only like 220 pages. Different aspects of Christ's heart. Very good and biblically based, but very dense, so that's why it took us a long time to get through. I said that I definitely will reread it in the future, and that the chapters were short, so we love that. Again, a really good Christian non-fiction book if you want a recommendation for that genre. The last book that I read in May was one of my sister's book club pick for May, Confess by Colleen Hoover. So this one here, you have a dual POV where you are following Owen and Auburn, and Auburn has kind of just like moved back to this town that Owen lives in, and one day she stumbles across Owen's art gallery, and Owen is somebody who asks for people's confessions and then he paints these people's confessions. And Colleen Hoover did say that all of the confessions that were in this book are real confessions from people, which I just think is so wild with some of the secrets. I said that I really loved this. The plot was good and interesting. Some side characters I liked and some I hated, so there was definitely some that like you were meant to like and some that you weren't. It's very easy to read. It had emotional depth. Definitely though to check the trigger warnings before reading this, because it does touch on some heavy topics. I really liked both the female main character and the male main character, and it was a dual POV, which I think added to the story. And again, it is an adult romance book and I thought it was done really well. Last but not least, we get into the books that I have just finished reading this past month. So these are all of the books that I read in June. The Mortal Instruments City of Ashes. So this is book 2 in the Mortal Instruments series. YA fantasy, kind of like urban fantasy. I enjoyed it. Not too long, which was good because it was only just over 400 pages. That it didn't have too much plot, but more just like hanging out with the characters, and had like 3 big scenes, which for me, I actually really enjoyed this. I didn't think there needed to be heaps in there. It was definitely like setting up more of the world, like the first book was. So honestly, loved this. Just as easy to read as the first book, and again, really enjoyed this. Then I was still in a fantasy mood, so I picked up Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This again is a YA fantasy. So in this world here, you have the elites and the ordinaries. The elites have powers and the ordinaries don't. Our main girl Peyton is an ordinary and she lives from the slums. She is also a thief and she steals to survive. And then we have our main guy Kai, who is an elite. He's part of like the kind of like rulers of the kingdom, like he's in their family, so he's like a prince. And then those two have a run-in, and both of them end up competing in trials, which are like 3 kind of like deadly designed games where basically elites compete to like gain respect of the people that live in this world. And Peyton gets put in these trials, so she basically has to survive. So it definitely gives like Hunger Games, but in a fantasy world. It is very easy to understand though, this fantasy world. It is really not complicated at all. This is going to be a trilogy. So there is this book, and then there is a little novella called Powerful, which got released I think last month or the month before. Haven't read it yet. It is on my list to read. And then book 2, Reckless, comes out this month, so I'm hoping that I can also get to that. But I love the way that this author writes. She writes really well, and considering she started this book when she was 18 and it got published at like 21, 22, like that's just wild to me, because when you were reading this you would not be able to tell. Also my favorite book out of June, that I loved this. There was a lot of Hunger Games and Maze Runner influence. I said that the writing was beautiful, very, very witty, which I love in books. Like the banter was great. Dual POV, think it added to it. Very well-rounded and connected story. Very easy fantasy world to understand. So yeah, I love this. If you've not read this, would highly, highly recommend. Christian non-fiction. So this one again is on my 24 books to read in 2024. Christianity on Trial by Colin Chapman. Just kind of goes through what evidence there is for Christianity, how reliable it is, different religions, different philosophers and their views, and how that stacks up to the world. And it was really, really good. Like there was a lot in this book. Very dense, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was definitely my most challenging read. It's definitely like a lot of theological terms, and I don't really read a lot that's kind of like this dense. I said that it had a lot of wisdom. And then the last book, the 33rd book that I have read so far this year, again is another book that is on my 24 books to read in 2024, and was my first non-fiction book of the year. It's A Girl Who Fell from the Sky by Emma Carey. So this is Emma Carey's autobiography. Basically, Emma Carey was in a skydiving accident. She fell 14,000 feet up in the air down to the ground and survived, and it's kind of just like her journey as she was paralyzed and then learned to walk, and just all of the things that she's had to overcome. And I just think her mindset is absolutely incredible, and I think that everybody could learn something from the outlook that she has on the world, and I just think it's very, very refreshing. It does also have like pictures and things in the book, which she does actually reference throughout the book, which is really good. That I loved. It was a hard-hitting story. It definitely reminds you of the fragility of life and the importance of appreciating the little things in life. And I said that it is a story that will definitely stay with me and definitely reminds me to be grateful for everything that I do have, because in an instant everything could be taken away, and in an instant everything could change. And one of the things that really stuck with me was when the police were doing investigations, they said that if she had pulled her parachute 1 second later or 1 second earlier, she would have avoided falling, because the emergency parachute deployed at the same time that the instructor pulled the string for the current parachute, and if it had been 1 second later she wouldn't have gone through all of this, which I just think is so crazy and so wild to me. So definitely give this a go. I really, really enjoy reading memoirs because I think that they can teach you a lot about life. So there we go, guys. Those are all of the books that I have read so far this year. Hopefully this video has given you guys some recommendations of some books to try. Obviously I will do a big wrap up at the end of the year as well, with all of the books that I read in the second half of the year. But yeah, I had so much fun doing this video last year that I really wanted to make another one, and I feel like I have read some really, really good books. I've always been a big reader ever since I was little, so I've loved honestly getting back into books. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you have not already. Please make sure to turn on the notifications and check out my social media. It's always linked down below in the description box. If you guys want to watch any more book related content, I have got an entire playlist called Reading on my channel, so I will leave that playlist down below for you guys, and also my video from last year will be in that. So if you want more book recommendations, I would definitely suggest checking out my wrap up that I uploaded at the beginning of this year of all the books that I read last year. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books and what your thoughts were, or if you're going to pick up any of these books after watching this video. I am very interested to know. Or if you guys have any recommendations of books that you think I should read, let me know that as well, and I shall see you guys in my next video. Bye.